Record to cloud. All right, we are now recording. Welcome to the series this week, Back to Basics. Today we're going to talk about, I'm kind of excited about this, and today we're going to talk about paperwork, which is not the most exciting topic in the world, but I'm glad that you all joined. There's a lot that goes into what has to happen with processing in regards to paperwork, and a lot that we can do as agents to really help streamline things on the back end and ensure that it's a smooth process both for our listings and for our sales. So I'm going to dive in here. If at any point in time you have questions or you have something to add, feel free to unmute yourself and talk, or throw something in the chat. I'll try to watch that as we go along here, but I'm going to break this down into two segments for us today. The first is paperwork that you need regarding a new listing. And then second, we're going to talk about turning in new sales contracts. So let's go ahead and dive right in here. I am going to stop my video real quick. I tend to make really weird faces when I'm instructing, looking at this huge screen that's in front of me. So I like to stop my video. All right. Okay. First and foremost, put it in chat. How long, we're going to talk, I've woven in some stuff in here about our MLS deadlines as well. There's a lot of dates that I'm going to throw at you. And after the class day, I'm recording this. After the class, you're going to have some resources. One of those things that I'm putting together is a cheat sheet. But who knows how long you have after you have an effective listing agreement to put it in MLS. Anyone? Throw it in chat. All right, Donna, you win the first quiz. It's 1 business day. 1 business day. That business day is important. This just got revised back in April because of a new policy from NAR, the National Association, it's called Clear Cooperation. And they really kind of want to level the playing field and help solve the issue with pocket listings, people withholding information from MLS. So they actually instituted this clear cooperation, and the rule that they've instituted is 1 business day. We used to have 2 calendar days per Heartland MLS locally, but now it's 1 business day. So if you have a listing, think about business days. We just came off a holiday weekend. If you had signed a listing agreement on Friday, your effective date, marketing date was on Friday, you wouldn't have had to put it into MLS until today. So again, think about business day on this and make sure that you're clear on that. I want to show you an example here because the way that the new listing agreements are structured, I just want to be really clear in regards to what constitutes your effective listing agreement versus this new basically, I call it a marketing date. It's this date right down here where the seller authorized showings. So on this example, exclusive right to sell contract, this is the new one. We've got the exclusive period beginning today, and the showings don't start until Friday. So in this scenario, put it in chat. What day do I have to have this put into MLS? Anyone? It would actually be tomorrow, the 27th. I have an effective listing agreement as of 5/26. I might not have it available to show, but it would have to go into MLS by tomorrow, and I would put it into pre-MLS. And then it would go active and available for showings on Friday, the 29th. So those dates are a little confusing. If you are, I was talking to one of the brokers this morning, I think she's on the call. She was saying that there's some confusion about if this date up here, the 5/26 date, is the same as this down here. You don't need to check this box down here. It says right here, line 14, unless otherwise indicated in the checkbox below, the data will be entered into Heartland into active status within 1 business day of the above. So if I had a listing that was going effective today and available today for showings, I wouldn't even check this box and put a date down here. Now you can cover yourself, check the box and put the same date, 5/26, but you don't have to. And again, I would have one business day from this date up here. This is when your exclusive is effective. This is when you can put your sign in the yard, is this date right up here. This date is what triggers your one business day to put it into MLS. Any questions on that before I move on? It's a little new look here, a new rule as far as dates. So I'm happy to take any questions or clarify anything. Again, feel free to either throw it in chat or unmute yourself, either way.
Christian, this is Daly.
Hi, Daly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's see, I had a question, just a second. My phone rang and it distracted me. Oh, you said if the beginning of the exclusive and the seller authorization date are different, then do you automatically put it in pre-MLS until that date you put the exclusive in?
Yeah, so those two, if these dates are different, this top date and this bottom date, if those are different, you've got a lag in here. You've got to put it in MLS within one business day of this date right up here.
Yes.
So you would need to put, like in this scenario that's up on the screen, I would need to put this into pre-MLS by tomorrow, and then it would automatically go into active status on Friday the 29th.
So when you put it in pre-MLS, you would state when you put it active, right?
Yeah, there's a field that you have to complete when you go into the future status, which is that's a technical term, future status for pre-MLS. You have to put a date in there when it goes active.
So it would automatically go in on the 29th.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so you don't have to do anything else because you've completed it right from the get-go.
Exactly, exactly.
Good, thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Any other questions on this?
Christian, this is Billy.
Hi, Billy.
As far as my agents go, I would prefer them not to use that bottom date at all unless they do desire it to be pre-MLS. They're getting it confused with the incomings.
Yeah, you don't use this for incoming. You only use this for if you're going to go into pre-MLS, or the other scenario that you would use it for is if, and I know a lot of our agents used to do this with the old form, was you want to lock down a listing. You don't want to wait until one business day before it has to go into MLS. If I go meet with a seller today, I don't want them to change, I want to lock down the listing, then I really need to do this. As opposed, even if, I don't really care about it going into pre-MLS, you've got to use these two different boxes. Paula, there is a change form that I'm going to show you in just a little bit. Paula put a question in chat that she has a listing in pre-MLS, sellers need to push back. What do I need to do? There's a change form that I will show you here in just a few minutes, and I believe that's the form that you're going to use. All right, I am going to move on from this. Okay, now we're going to talk about your listing documents. You're taking a new listing. I'm going to throw one more date at you. Read up on the screen. I'll read it out loud to you. If you're inputting your own listing into MLS, some of you do, some offices, agents are inputting their own listings. Some of them we've got processors inputting. But if you're inputting your own listing, you've got to turn in all your documents. And in a second, we're going to talk about what those documents are. But how long do you have to turn in those documents to your processor or broker? Do you know? I will cheat for you and tell you. 3 calendar days from when it went active. You need to get this to your processor, or 3 days from basically from when you put it into MLS. Whether that's pre-MLS, it went active the same day. You've got 3 calendar days to get all your paperwork into your processor or broker. So let's talk about what documents need to come in with a new listing. And I'm going to talk about, because we've got people on the call from different offices, I'm going to talk about the paperwork you need. And this is the bare minimum. This is the required paperwork. You might have additional things, but I'm going to talk about two different things. I'm going to talk about if you input your own listing, and then we're going to talk about documents required if you have your processor or broker input your listings. So the first slide here that I'm going to show you, though, is for everybody. This is, if you're taking a new listing, this is what you need to have turned in, regardless of if you're putting it in or your office is putting in the listing. So let's roll through these real quick. You need to have an exclusive right to sell. That's your listing agreement. If it is a Missouri property, you do need to have broker's signature on this. Your seller's disclosure needs to be executed and signed. Lead-based paint. If the property was built before 1978, if applicable, you need to have your lead-based paint. You need to have your BHD, your franchise disclosure, that's signed by the sellers. Your seller's estimated proceeds worksheet. This is really important. This needs to be turned in with your initial documents. If you don't know how to figure that, you're going to want to tune in today at 1 o'clock. We're going to test my math skills, and we're going to go through both buyer and seller estimated proceeds worksheet, how you prepare those. I'm going to go through preparing those by hand, and then I'm also going to show you an app that's available to you that will prepare it for you, kind of the easy button. But you need to do that. Business practice, just kind of a tip for you. I do these, well, at minimum 3. I'm doing the seller's estimated proceeds worksheet 3 times. I do it on my initial listing presentation when we're talking about price. I show them, especially, and this thing has 2 columns on it, which is kind of nice. I show them, if we're debating on price, what their estimated proceeds would be at those 2 different price points. So I'm showing it to them then. Once we decide on a price, I fine tune that, and that's what they sign for me to turn in with my listing documents. And then beyond that, and we'll talk more about this Thursday in the contract to close class, as we're negotiating offers, I also fill this out. And that way they know what we're negotiating off of. They've got an idea as to where the offer, based on the buyer's terms of the offer, where they're going to end up on proceeds. So just kind of sidebar there. You really need to know how to, the seller side really isn't that hard, but you need to know how to figure those and update them. The fixed commission explanation, this needs to be signed by the sellers as well. This explains that $265 fee. And then Kansas or Missouri broker disclosure forms. Now, these don't have to be signed by the client, but these are required per the Missouri and the Kansas Real Estate Commission to be in the files. A lot of people were not, once we went to kind of a paperless system, a lot of agents didn't realize that these were forms that were being thrown in by their processors into paper files, and they didn't realize that these are actually forms that they need to handle and make sure that you put these in your loop. You put these in your document package, and I'll show you what those look like here in just a few minutes, but just know that you need to have those. And then last but not least, this is not necessarily required. It is in some offices. It's not in every office. It's not required per the Real Estate Commission, but I think this will help your processors. But print off a realist tax record to include that. And then there's one other step that we're gonna talk about when I break down then the additional documents you need if you're putting in your own listing versus putting in here on the next page. So bear with me for just a second, because I'm going to have another trailing thought on that realist tax record. The asterisks that you see above, the seller's disclosure, lead-based paint, those are documents that need to be included in your MLS supplements. And then as I mentioned, the Kansas and Missouri broker disclosure, they don't require client signatures. The Kansas form does have a space for you to fill in both your name and your broker's name. And there is an acknowledgement for one of the sellers to sign that, but they don't have to, it's not required. There's a question that came through. I can't tell who it is because your name is iPad. Yes, it's on the exclusive right to sell, but I always have them do I have them sign that fixed commission explanation just in case. Always have them sign that, both buyers and sellers. Okay, if you're inputting your own listing, so your processor, the office isn't inputting your listing. When you do your document package, this is in addition to everything that was on the previous page. Include a PDF of the active listing. Once you put it into MLS, go to print, this is where I do the full detail, and then I attach the tax record. And when I hit print, I save it to a PDF, and then I upload it into my loop. And that way my processor, Terry, out at the Blue Valley office knows that it's active. She knows what it looks like and she can check it. If you are not inputting your own listing, your office is inputting your listings, you also need to include, and this is critical with your paperwork, the MLS input form. It's a bear to fill out, but your processors can't input your listing without this, and it needs to be complete. I know those processors that are on the phone, feel free to chime in here. If there are some things that maybe you see that aren't, that are chronically not filled out on this MLS input form, that would be really helpful, just to remind the agents. So if you want to unmute and chime in, or chime in on chat, feel free. And then the other thing that you need to include if you're not inputting your own listing is there is now a form, it's the showing time listing form, and I'll show you that in just a second. Or there are some offices that still use the MLS change form. And this allows whoever's inputting your listing to also input your showing instructions. Anyone have questions on those items? Any questions, any process there? I know Gloria's on here, Billy, Arletta. Do you want to chime in about any paperwork that we've talked about so far on listings that would be good reminders for everybody to make sure that they're turning in? Things that you historically see that are missed? All right, I'm going to keep rolling on then. Okay, we're going to talk about, thanks, Gloria. We're going to talk real quick about, Michelle put in chat, make sure dates match. Absolutely. Absolutely. Make sure all your dates match up. Okay, so what form do you use if you have to change your exclusive right to sell? Paula, this goes back to that question that you had. You've got a listing in pre-MLS. You've got to push back your marketing date. This is the form that you're going to use. And I will give you a hint. It is not our MLS change form. There's a big difference between our MLS change form and the next form I'm going to show you. You need to use the change listing agreement form. It looks like this. This is the form that's recognized by KCRAR. So if you are inputting, there's some agents that used to do this when listings sat on the market for a while. They would cancel and re-enter. If you cancel and re-enter, you cannot use this form, by the way. You need to use this for a cancellation, and then you've got to sign a whole new listing agreement, just so you know. That form, let me pull it up real quick so I can show it to you. I don't know that I have it already in here, so let me pull it into one of these. I want to show you that form that a lot of people use. Bear with me here for just a second. Let me get this pulled up. So this form probably looks familiar to many of you. This is the one I was talking about that you need to turn into processing if you're not inputting your own listings. It tells, iBox, occupants, who they're calling, etc. This form is not recognized by KCRAR. So if you're doing anything contractually, changing the contract, changing, like Paula's example of you've got to push back a date, you're going to extend your listing agreement, you're going to do a price change. Those need to happen on this form. This form, and we figured this out a couple years ago because we got flagged on something from MLS, and they called out at the Blue Valley office, and we sent them to document what we had done. We sent them this form, and they called us back and they go, we've never seen this form. This is not, we don't recognize this form. We recognize this form internally. It's not recognized by KCRAR. So if you've got any changes, and this form is used for both the listing agreement and your buyer agency agreement. This is the form that you need to use if you've got any changes to either your listing agreement or your buyer agency agreement. You can check right here your price, your extension, if you revise your commission, and then down here in the second section are any revisions to your buyer agency contract. And this does require a broker signature on it. Any questions on that? I know this is more falls into that Thursday class at contract to close, but I think it's important as we just talk about paperwork that I bring this one up. Okay, when you're using that form, how many days do you have to input changes? So if you've got a price change, how many days do you have to do that in MLS? Anyone know? Throwing another date quiz at you. 1 calendar day. 1 calendar day. So your listing has to go in your effective date. That's 1 business day. Pretty much everything else you'll see on the screen, this little chart. Everything else is pretty much 1 calendar day. This is for MLS. MLS, 1 business day to input your listing into MLS from the effective date, 1 calendar day on pretty much everything else. Okay, any questions on, as we wrap up kind of the listing side of things? Any questions or comments or things they thought were required that I haven't covered on new listings before we dive into sales contracts? All right. I'll take the silence as you all are hanging in there and following along well. Paula asked a question, supplements are due at marketing time, not initial time. That is correct, Paula. That is correct. You've got to put you need to have supplements loaded into MLS before it goes into active status.
Christian Leslie feedback here.
Hey, Leslie.
Hi, I'm learning how to do this Zoom on my phone, so I apologize for the late chime in.
You're fine.
Help me understand also the pre-MLS, and I jumped in late, so maybe I'm in the wrong spot here, but going live versus going pre-MLS and doing any marketing. I wanted to do a flyer blast for a pre-MLS coming on. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the whole pre-MLS and versus going live in those timelines.
I'm going to go back to that example. So with pre-MLS, you can, oh, there we were. I'm going to go back to this example. This example, I'm going to go into pre-MLS today. So between today and Friday, there's one thing I cannot do. And that one thing that I cannot do is show the property. But I can market the heck out of the property. So if I want to send out a flyer blast, I can put a sign up in the yard. I can send out a flyer blast. I can call everybody I know to tell them about it. I can put it on Facebook. I can take out a front page ad in the Kansas City Star. I can do whatever I want to market this property. The one thing that I cannot do and the sellers cannot do is let somebody enter that property to show it. So that's pre-MLS. That is the difference between your active date and your when it sits in pre-MLS and what you can do. Now I will say this for the benefit of the group, because Leslie that just asked that question called me over the weekend. When your listing sits in pre-MLS, when it's in that future status, it does not get fed anywhere, including Zillow. So it's not getting fed out to any third-party sites, any brokerage websites. You can't even go into MLS and share that with your seller. So what you have to do if you want to share it with your seller to show them what it looks like is print off a PDF or do a full detail, save it as a PDF, and email it to them. You cannot send out a link from pre-MLS status. But when it's in pre-MLS status, you can do whatever you want to marketing-wise. Whatever you want. The only thing you cannot do is let somebody come through that door and view it. And if you do, that property has to go active immediately. And it states that right down here. It's kind of covered up by my circle here. But if you decide, if you and the seller decide that, gosh, this doesn't go active till Friday, I call the seller on Wednesday and say, I keep getting calls. There's a whole bunch of people that want to get into it tomorrow. If I let one person in, I've got to bring this thing active immediately.
Did you say that when it's in pre-MLS, it does not get populated to all the other, like Realtor.com, et cetera, sites?
Nope. The only place it sits is in MLS, and the only people that have access to it are MLS subscribers.
And then did you say that you cannot send a link to them during that time?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct. You can't do anything with it with the MLS data, with what's sitting in MLS until it goes active. But you can do your own marketing stuff. You can do flyers, flyer blasts. You can do all sorts of marketing, phone call, whatever you want to do, take out a billboard, whatever you want to do marketing wise. The only thing you cannot do is show it.
And question, I
Yeah,
thought I'm sorry. I thought flyer blast would send a notification at some point that they will no longer blast coming soon. Do you know if that to be true or not?
They put out notification that they will no longer blast coming soon. How they're handling this, I don't know. But when it switched over from pre-MLS to the whole Cummings, or from Cummings, the whole coming soon concept to pre-MLS, there were a lot of agents that had, that were using that service that didn't have listing agreements or didn't necessarily have anything on a temporary waiver. So I don't know if they terminated doing that. I don't know what they're doing now, but they can't, I mean, technically they can send stuff out. An agent, I mean, you can send out marketing. You can send out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Whether they're doing that or not, they're, they're third party, how they do their business practice, I don't know. But they can certainly do it. Now, if I own that company, I'm going to be real careful about what I shoot out and make sure that I have confirmation that agent has an effective listing agreement. Any other questions on that before we move into, I think I clicked too far forward. I did. Just a second. Okay. All right, let's move into sales contracts now. Let's move into sales contracts. Another little pop quiz for you. If your listing goes under contract, you're the listing agent, goes under contract, how many days do you have to change the status in MLS? 1 day, and it's 1 calendar day. This is not business days, this is calendar days. So if you have an effective contract on Friday, it needs to be changed by Saturday. It can't be, you can't hold off until Monday. It's got it 1 calendar day on this. It's not business days. Okay, so let's go through first your documents that need to be turned in on a new sales contract when you're representing the seller. So for your listing, what do you have to turn in? Well, you got to turn in your sales worksheet and it needs to be completed. This is probably one of the biggest frustrations that I hear from our processors when they're trying to process sales. They need to have this sales worksheet complete. Don't turn in partial sales worksheets. It creates hurdles that the processors then they've got to stop, get the information, then come back to it. It doesn't allow them to input everything if you don't have a complete sales worksheet. So make sure you're filling out that sales worksheet and you're filling everything out. Well, you need to have a contract, residential resale contract or the like if you're representing a condo resale contract. Make sure every page is initialed. You've got your check boxes, everybody signed where appropriate. Make sure that, double check those. And then all supporting addendum is noted in paragraph 2 on page 2 of the contract. So this is your seller's disclosure, your lead-based paint if that's applicable, it's your septic addendum if that's applicable, your pool and spa rider, whatever pieces, whatever addendas are checked on paragraph 2, page 2 of the contract. Check your counter offer too. If you've added documents since the original offer, if the agent maybe wrote the contract and didn't include the septic addendum and you added it later, check both of those and make sure all of those supporting addenda are attached and are included when you submit your paperwork.
What did you say about when you have something that comes later? Supporting addendas?
Under support, I said when you might have on the original offer, the base contract, your residential resale contract in paragraph 2, page 2, where you've got supporting addenda, you might have something that wasn't included on the original offer, but then through the course of negotiation, it does get included. So it's then on the counter offer.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Christian, I have a question.
Yeah.
I received a lead-based paint disclosure signed by the buyer's agent on my listing 2 days after the effective date. Does that change the effective date because it's the lead-based paint disclosure signed by the buyer's agent?
If I say this wrong and somebody knows for sure, correct me, but I believe that they changed that this year with our new 2020 forms, that the lead-based paint now does not, if it comes in, if it trails, it does not affect the effective date.
I don't hear any challenges to that, so
Yeah,
I'll take that as a yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'll pull that up here in a second, but I believe that
That's correct.
That's what I thought. That's from memory. But yeah, that was a change that went into effect this year. Up until then, a trailing lead-based paint would change your effective date, which then changes your inspection time period. It changes everything, right? And there were some issues with that, so that no longer changes your effective date. Jan's asking, say that again about lead-based paint. If your lead-based paint comes in after your effective date, let's say the buyer misses an initial or one of them signed and the other one didn't, a checkbox is missing, the lead-based paint does not dictate your effective date anymore. It can come in after you've got an effective date. That is correct. Gloria is right that it doesn't affect your effective date, but the federal requirement, that's got your lead-based paint needs to be disclosed and signed prior to the contract. So you're going to have to get wet signatures and have that dated. I'd have that dated for the date that they wrote the contract.
I think that also applies to the seller's disclosure. At least that's what is my understanding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to keep rolling here if I'll watch chat if we've got any trailing questions on that. Your franchise disclosure, just, this is another change that happened in 2020 where this no longer needs to be checked on paragraph 2, page 2 of the contract. Our franchise disclosure has to be signed, not by both parties, but the party that's being represented by Better Homes and Gardens Kansas City Homes. So when you turn in your sales contract, you need to have your franchise disclosure turned in with your seller's signature. Now I'll say this should have already been turned in. This should come in with your listing documents. So technically that really needs to be taken off of there, but it's good practice just to turn all of this in together. Your seller's estimated proceeds worksheet. Again, you filled one out when you listed. I always do another one here and show them how their estimated proceeds changed based on what we're dealing with now on the contract. You need to turn in the buyer's pre-approval letter or proof of funds. That needs to be turned in with your sales contract, even when you're representing the seller. And then a copy of the earnest money deposit check, if applicable. A lot of times now we're doing wires or they're doing ACH transfers. But you need to, and I know this is hard. This is probably one of the biggest challenges we have right now, is trying to get this darn copy of the check from the buyer's agent, because often the buyer's agents don't even touch the check. The client's dropping it off to the title company, etc. But you need to have a copy of the earnest deposit check when you turn in your sales contract. That really needs to come in with your initial paperwork. I know that's not always possible, but it really needs to come in with your initial paperwork if at all possible. And then a referral agreement, if applicable. Make sure that that comes in with your initial sales contract, and that you also put that on your sales worksheet. So your referral agreement, typically those are signed by the brokers as well. Make sure that's also on your worksheet. Okay, any questions on those documents? Now, what's missing from this list are things that you've already turned in on with your listing documents, like your Kansas or Missouri broker disclosure. Your exclusive right to sell, already turned in. That came in with your listing documents. Any questions on that list before I go on to the buyer list? This is, again, this is if you're representing the seller. This is on your listing. Okay, let's move on then to if you're representing a buyer. All right, we've got our sales worksheet complete again. Make sure, especially as a buyer, you've got your title company information for both the seller and your buyer completed. That's something that I know gets left off quite often. Again, you've got your contract, all supporting addendum, your counteroffer, if applicable, got a typo in there. Your franchise disclosure, again, this time it's with your buyer's signature. You don't need to attach that to the contract anymore. You don't need to have the seller sign it, just your buyer. And then you've got your buyer's estimated proceeds worksheet. This one's a little trickier to fill out than the seller. Again, we're going to go through this at 1 o'clock today, live, on how to do those. Oftentimes, I like getting that from the lender. The lender is going to put together probably the most comprehensive cost estimate for my buyer. So if I can get my hands on that from the lender, I'm including the lender generated proceeds or cost worksheet. That way, I don't have to do the math. I know it's accurate because it's the lender putting it together, and it checks that box for our processing department. So if you can get it from the lender, get it from the lender. You need to have buyers, their pre-approval letter or proof of funds, a copy of the earnest deposit, if applicable, referral agreement, if applicable. Our letter notes that, yes, they do have an app, and I'm going to show that today at 1 o'clock. It's the easy button for doing these proceeds worksheets. But I'm still going to show you how to do the math. I think it's important to know that. And then your exclusive buyer agency contract needs to come in with this as well. Again, remember that buyer agency contract needs to be dated prior to your sales contract. If it's not, you were practicing incorrect agency. You could get a big fine from the real estate commission. So make sure that exclusive buyer agency contract is filled out. Again, if it's Missouri, broker has to sign. And of course, your Kansas or Missouri broker disclosure form. That needs to come in with this as well. And then last but not least, I always include that fixed commission explanation. I know it's included to some extent in that exclusive buyer agency contract. The figure is included in there. What's not really included in there is the explanation. And I think it's important, that explanation, for them to understand why we're charging that. Any questions on these documents? I have one more. Yep, I have one more. I was like, there's something missing here. I always include a PDF printout of the MLS and the realist tax. I do that on both sides. This is important if you ever get into a situation where all of a sudden they're going to change your commission. You need to have a printout of the MLS and what it showed at the time you showed the property, time you wrote the offer. And this way they can't pull any funny business on you and try to change your commission. It's happened It does happen. Any questions or comments on these documents? All right. How many days, another pop quiz for you, how many days from the effective date of the contract, doesn't matter if you're representing listing or the buyer, do you have to turn your sale into processing? Thank you, Rebecca. 3 days. 3 days. And these are calendar days. These are not business days. These are calendar days. You need to turn your sales into processing. That's a really important step. And this is the effective date of the contract. This isn't inspections. This isn't when you feel like it. This is the effective date of the contract. Gloria notes on the, going back to including the PDF of the MLS printout and the tax, it also shows, that's a great point, Gloria, it shows that it's been changed to pending or backup, especially when it's your listing. They can see that that's already happened. It's not something that they need to do.
Kristen,
Yes, Daily.
when you're counting those 3 days, say the effective date was today, the 26th, do you count the 26th as the first day, or do you go to the next day and count that as the first day like you do when you're calculating inspection days?
You know, I always start at the next day. Tomorrow would be day 1, then day 2, then day 3.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If that's incorrect from somebody, one of Gloria or Arletta, Billy that's on here, let me know. But I always calculate it starting the following day. Day it's effective is day 0. Okay, when you're sharing your paperwork with your processor, who else do you need to send documents to? Probably important that the title company gets them, and then the lender if you're representing the buyer. Make sure that everybody has the contract. Again, we're going to cover this on Thursday in the contract to close class, but really important that every step of the way you're updating everybody. Any amendments, price changes due to inspections, especially on price changes, you've got to make sure that your processor knows so they can reissue commission letters if need be. The title company knows. It's pretty important for the lender to know if there's a price change or an adjustment to closing costs. So make sure that you're updating everybody as you go through the process, not just on initial contract, but also on, you know, all the stuff that we deal with contract to close. Excuse me. So I want to show you a couple little tools that you have access to that will help you stay on track with your paperwork. This is page 2 of your MLS worksheet. So our sales worksheet, let me flip over here to Dot Loop real quick. Where's my sales worksheet? Right here. So page 1, this is where I'm going to fill out completely. Page 2 is this worksheet. And you even have little check boxes here where I can check things off. Pretty handy. So this is what it looks like. The bottom of it, it sits over here, is if it's a short sale, some things that you need, and then a new homes contract. This really walks you through all the what ifs here. All the what ifs. So I highly recommend that you use this. You know, I know we just kind of get going and sometimes the paperwork and the attention to detail is not necessarily everybody's strong suit, but it sure helps our processors, the accounting department, everybody be a lot more efficient if we as agents start the process off right and can give them the correct paperwork the first time. Otherwise, we're duplicating the amount of work that they're doing, which isn't fair to them. So please make sure that you're not making them chase you around for paperwork, that you get everything turned in. It's not hard. We've got lots of tools to help you do that. Once you get everything turned in, I'm going to show you something next that not all of you have seen before. We have some offices that use this and some of them that don't. Those that don't, I think, are going to start using it. But we have for our back end, for the processing in our accounting department, we've gone to a platform called SkySlope. Some of you have heard of it. Some of you, if you're in the Northland office, you're using it all the time. It's a part of your processing checklist. You've got to load everything into SkySlope. I just want to show you a little tiny piece of it from the agent perspective on how we stay on track throughout the contract to close, and especially after our initial share with our processors. So let me show you really quick on listings. So this is an example of an email that I get from Debbie at the Blue Valley office. She's the one out there that processes our listings. And once she inputs everything into SkySlope, I don't touch it. We don't want, for the most part, we don't want agents touching it. It's our processors that go in and touch it. But she sends me this handy little checklist so I can see if anything's missing. And it's, what's awesome is it's color coded. If you've taken any of my classes before, it's no secret that I love color. Like, I'm a visual person. I like things color coded. And I love that this is all color coded. Let me show you what this looks like when it comes through on my email. Here is this right here. Hopefully you can see this. It comes through, it says SkySlope checklist reviewed. It gives me the property address, and then it gives me a list. If there was something that was required that I forgot, I'd have a big red box here that says required, or I think it says missing. I'll show you in the next one because I had a missing document. You're right, Gloria, I have no red. This gives me serious satisfaction when I get these checklists and I have no red. When I get one that has red, like this one, it freaks me out. But I know at a glance what I missed. Let me go back over here to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to go back and show you that one. So your listing one, this is after you've turned in a new listing. Again, if your office has not been sending these, I think we're going to start having all the office send these. But again, on listings, I get this little checklist. It shows me what I missed, what I didn't miss, what I still need to turn in if applicable. Okay, so on sales, the emails look a little bit different. There's a lot more components that go into sales. So when I get my checklist from Terry, we've got our sales documents. This is a screenshot of this email that I had right over here from Terry. Here's what it looks like live when it came through my email. And I know what I missed. I know that I knew that it was missing that third-party receipt. I wanted to get it turned in quick, and I didn't have the receipt yet. And then of course my inspection notice resolution, well, that's not going to be turned in until after I get through inspections. So I'm not worried about the red down here. But these are all the initial sales documents. That's a nice little color-coded checklist for me. And then on the sales ones, these are broken out into sections. So we've got all of our sales documents, and then we've got disclosure documentation. We've got our seller's disclosure, lead-based paint. This one needed a box checked. I completed that. I don't have these. Actually, I turned in my fixed commission explanation. So that should be complete. If I had a referral agreement, anything down here, closing documents as we get closer to closing, she'll send me another checklist. Then she sends me a checklist after closing to let me know with a print off of the MLS to show it went into sold status. And I can see if there was any paperwork that was still trailing or missing. Because guess what happens? I don't get my check. If I've got red, I don't get my check. And I want to get paid. Arletta, you're correct that down here, the fixed commission is down here. Here's my listing document. So those carried over, and I've got everything down here. There's my fixed commission explanation right there. I know some of you are seeing this SkySlope thing for the first time, this checklist. It's pretty handy. It keeps me on track when I get these. I can immediately see what I'm missing and what I need to turn in. Any questions on that piece or the checklist that is in MLS?
Who fills in the comments and the actions? Do we have
That
the
is
ability?
all done by our admins, our processors.
But we don't have the ability to enter anything into those columns.
No, we don't.
Okay.
We don't. Yeah, no, we really want for most offices right now, we really want our processors to be handling everything in SkySlope. So from the agent perspective, we really just want that to be a view only. Although if you got in there, you could see that you could do stuff, but we don't want you doing it. So we just want you to look at the checklist. Laura, I'll do a class at some point on SkySlope, but right now it's a little tricky because our offices are handling it a little bit different. Some offices, the agents are doing everything in SkySlope, and others, the agents have never even seen it. I want to show you a real quick sneak peek at something that I'm going to show in detail when I do the .loop basics class. I want to show you one little tip that I use to keep myself on track with paperwork. So I have created, and again, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. I just want to show this to you. If you want to learn how to do it, come to the .loops basics class. I think that one is on Thursday, and I'll show you how you set this up. But I'm just going to go in here to my forms thing. Bear with me for a second while I add a new folder, test folder. So I have created, if you're familiar with .loop, if I want to add documents to a folder, typically we're going to click on templates, and then we've got some categories here that are put together by Joanna. So listing docs are here. These are everything that you might need for a listing. There's a lot of stuff in there. I don't need all that stuff for every one of my listings. So I have created my own template list of what I typically use on my transactions and what's required for processing. And I'm going to show you how to set those up on Thursday. But right here is the name, Christian's Listing Packet. So I know this is what I need when I do my listings. And some of this stuff is already pre-filled out. So my sales worksheet is pre-filled out. So I know if it's a listing, I'm the selling agent, that stuff is pre-filled out. I know what title company I'm using, pre-filled out. Saves me a ton of time. Again, I'm going to show you this on Thursday in our .loop class. But this really, I need to select them. This saves me a ton of time, not just a ton of time in .loop, but it also, here's the documents that I need. It also is I don't have to sit there. This is especially good for newer agents. I don't have to sit there with a list and say, okay, what documents do I need? And then figure out, okay, they're called different on my checklist than they are inside of .loop. You can go in and set that up once and then have access to, everything that you typically use on your listings and what's required to turn into processing. And then I also make sure I drag them and make sure that they're in a specific order. There's a specific order that I like to have them in that also makes sense for processing. Okay, speaking of, I'm going to click through this as we wind down here. These are the classes that are coming up in this series. We've got, you just finished perfecting your paperwork. Again, 1 o'clock today, we're going to calculate closing costs. Tomorrow, I was wrong. I apologize. I kept saying that this class was on Thursday, and it's actually tomorrow morning at 9:30. We've got our contract to close. I'm going to show you a really cool checklist that I created that you all will have access to, and talk about some things that you just need to be aware of, high level contract to close, what you need to be doing, and some processes that will maybe help you streamline things. And then I've got Home Suite Basics tomorrow afternoon. And then Thursday, we've got Navigating Inspections, and then .loop Basics. And then Friday, this isn't just for ninjas, it's for everybody because it's real basics. Review a Ninja 9 and how to stay in contact and stay front and center with your sphere. Any questions that you all have on what I covered today, paperwork-wise? If you want to unmute yourself, you are welcome to, or you can throw it in chat. I appreciate you all joining our first session of this series today. And I hope that you have a good day, and I'll see a couple of you, I'm sure, this afternoon as we calculate closing costs. Gloria, good reminder, review your paperwork before submitting. Make sure you've got the right things attached. Arletta, form of earnest money. This happens all the, this is very common where the form, the earnest money is coming in, whether it is a cashier's check, an ACH transfer, a personal check, oftentimes it doesn't match what was on the contract or the counter offer. Make sure that matches. And if it doesn't, you need to do an addendum, you need to do an amendment. So I know it's a challenge because some companies, some of our competitors don't require that, but we do. So make sure that the form that the earnest money is coming in matches your counteroffer. And if it doesn't, do an amendment. Do an amendment. Thank you all very much for joining. I appreciate the comments. I hope that you found this helpful and kind of a good reminder for some. And I know this is new information for others, but I appreciate you joining, and I'll hang out for a few minutes if you have any questions.